Hi, my name is Kamar Zachery, and I'm your host for this episode of Niche or Die. See, over the past couple of weeks and months, I've had the pleasure of connecting with some of the most influential people in the world, people featured in Forbes, Bloomberg, Inc. magazine, and I brought them all together to do video interviews just for you. Now, in this particular episode, you're actually going to hear from a gentleman by the name of Brendan Kane. Brendan is a super successful entrepreneur, speaker, and author. He's worked with hundreds of individuals and brands over the last 15 years, helping them with their business and digital strategies. He's worked with brands like MTV, celebrities such as Rhianna, Taylor Swift, and many more. So I'm super excited that you're actually going to hear a wealth of knowledge from Brendan in this short video. All right, Brendan, welcome to Niche or Die. It's a privilege to have you with us today. I know time is of the essence, so if it's all right, we'll go ahead and jump right in.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to connect with you and everybody that's tuning into this.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I first learned about you through your book, 1 Million Followers. And it's been an absolute eye opener in terms of how people go about building their audience on social media. And a lot of people, some people don't know the importance of having an audience. And experts like yourself saw early on the value that brings. Could you share with us what gave you the inspiration to even want 1 million followers?
Yeah, so it wasn't that I wanted 1 million followers. So it was, I had, one of my passions is teaching, inspiring people to kind of achieve their goals and aspirations. And I started in social media in the very earliest forms of it. I started back in 2004, in like the Friendster and the MySpace days. So over the course of the years of working in the space, I learned a tremendous amount about how to capitalize or how to cultivate an audience first, how to grow an audience, how to generate that reach, that engagement, to get people to perform the specific actions that you were going for. And then fundamentally, how does that play to overall business goals and objectives? And, I'd spent about 3.5 years working with some professional athletes and celebrities and journalists that kind of tasked me with how do we kind of grow our audience, because especially, for example, the action sports athletes I worked with, their earning potential is heavily predicated based on their social media following, because earning potential from contest winnings is not like that you get paid in traditional mainstream sports. So I started really experimenting there and testing and developing these methodologies. And again, I had always wanted to create a book that I could teach people the principles that I had been learning, but I didn't feel like it had a strong enough hook point, something that really could draw attention at the highest levels. And then through all these tests and experiments, through the process I developed, I could see that there was definitely patterns and predictability if you had the right content to scale and scale very quickly. So that just kind of seeded the idea or the hook point in my mind. Well, what would happen if I generated 1 million followers in 30 days? And again, it wasn't a matter of if I could do it. It was a matter of why I should do it. So the first place and the way that I do this for all of my hook points, I started testing it. I called a literary agent that had represented over $5 billion worth of book sales. And I said, hey, I'm thinking about doing this experiment. If I do it, do you think it would be an interesting premise for a book? And would you sign me as a client and get me a publishing deal? And he said, yes. So that was one clue, but I don't just talk to one person. I talk to other people and other marketing experts to say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Is this interesting? Because when you make an investment in the exercise, but more so in the book, like a book, you're living with that thing for years and years and years. You want to make sure it's on stable foundation. So after I got positive feedback around the board, that's when I decided to set out and do the experiment and turn it into a book. But to give you, and I think this is an interesting exercise for anybody trying to scale their business, You've obviously read the book. The book does talk about follower growth, but it's far deeper than that. It talks about the psychology of content, how to effectively communicate, how to tap into strategic partnerships for growth, how to create shareable content. And one of the reasons I've had success in my career and success with the clients I work with is understanding the difference between needs and wants of a consumer. Is oftentimes people fall flat by expressing what they fundamentally believe that consumer needs, but the consumer is not there yet. So I knew I had all of these principles that I wanted to teach people to give them a solid foundation for success. But if I would have led with any one of them, even though I know they need to know this, it would have fallen flat. So I anchored that hook point to followers, which is a very popular subject matter and a lot of people are interested in. So I bring them in with that. I do deliver on that promise, but I say, listen, if you really want followers, you need to learn all of these other things. So that's another kind of core methodology that we use in all the businesses we work with, but also, a little bit more reasoning behind the title as well.
Absolutely, man. It got me, honestly. I mean, you make a good point. Had you led with, this is how you could, get strategic partnerships, or, if you mentioned some of the other benefits, I probably wouldn't have got the book. But 1 million followers in 30 days, man, everyone wants to know. People pay. I've got friends that pay, contractors to help them get 10,000 followers. And so 1 million followers in 30 days, that's quite fascinating. Let me ask you, how important, so in your experience, how important is it for your clients and brands that you've worked with to have identified a specific niche?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there's two answers to that. Number one, it's very important at a foundational piece to understand who your core audience is to really scale a business. But number two is you have to learn how to create content. If you're talking about social media, and especially talking about organic social, okay, talking about followers, virality, and things like that, it's critically important that even though you have this specific persona, this specific niche, that your content can play to a general audience. Because the biggest mistake people make today is when they're designing content, they're only designing for their niche. And the reason that's a problem is because of the algorithms. Now, there's a lot of demonization of what an algorithm is. There's a lot of myths out there. Like the biggest myth is the algorithms are there to suppress your reach so that you pay to boost your post or to advertise your content. That is inherently false, because if that was the case, nobody would go viral. When you talk about my book, that book is not just about me. It has a lot of my friends and partners. Collectively, we've generated well over 200 million followers and hundreds of billions of views. So the algorithms have one job and one job only. That is to keep people on the platform longer. Why? Because the longer somebody spends on that platform, the more ads they can serve them. That's how they make money. So the algorithms are looking for content that they can push to the widest audience that will do two things. One, stop the scroll, because that's the first signal you can hold attention. If you can't get them to stop the scroll, that's the first signal to the algorithm to say this content we can't push to a wide audience because it's not going to hold attention, so we're going to suppress it. So number one, can you stop the scroll? Number two, what does your retention graph look like? How does your storytelling unfold to hold people for the longest period of time? Now, over the years, things have shifted. So in the past, a lot of people would talk about frequency. You got to create as much content or hashtags or time of day. There was a point in social media where that did make a difference. But today, there's 3.96 billion people on social media pushing hundreds of billions of messages into the world every day. So the algorithms have billions of pieces of content to choose from. It's super cutthroat. One of my friends that I just interviewed for a magazine that we're about to launch called Viral Content Engineering, he's about to hit 20 million followers on TikTok. And we did an analysis of his most viewed video, which was 90 million views, and another video that was 5 million views. So the average retention of the 90 million views was 27 seconds, and the 5 million view one was 21 seconds. We're talking about a 6-second differential that represented an 85 million view difference. That's the world that we're living in. So going back to the original question is, how do we make your content interesting to the general population, but still serves your underlying business customer? So an example of that, there is a real estate agent named Ryan Serhant who represents $10 million plus properties. He's selling properties upwards of $100 million. So obviously that's a very specific niche. He's the ultra rich, the ultra luxury. But what he did with his YouTube channel, and subsequently it spilled over to his Instagram, is he was so brilliant to understand, hey, I need to make my content interesting to the general audience to be able to reach my core niche audience organically. Again, with paid advertising, you get very super hyper targeted. So what he did is, I'm going to take you on a tour of a $7 million closet. I'm going to take you on a tour of a $250 million ranch. Now, who doesn't want to see what that looks like? Even though if you can't afford it, you still want to see what that is about. But within that, he's still playing to his core target audience, because he's talking about these ultra luxury properties and that he's the expert on them. And he has said that he's sold 10, 20, $30 million properties off of the YouTube videos that he creates. So that's kind of how it kind of plays in together. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I'll admit I had that all wrong, because I was one of those who thought that, the algorithm was designed to, suppress our content so that we have to pay for ads. And what you just shared, that makes a whole lot more sense.
Yeah, it's not true, because nothing would go viral. And like and I can even look at accounts that we've built, my accounts. We could have one video that generates 10,000 views and the next video generates 25 million views. So if we really had to pay for reach, we would never get the 25 million views on the other one. They want to serve, they don't make money that way. They don't make money off the average person spending $10 to boost a post. They make money off the direct response people and the major brands, to the tune of, I don't even know what it is. I think it's, the last numbers I saw, it's close to like 50 billion a year in advertising. You're not going to make that off of the average person spending $10, because most people don't care. The average user does not care. And the real businesses that spend the most money are selling a product at scale.
So what type of advice do you have for us, for the individual who has absolutely no experience? They don't really know anything about marketing. They're trying to bootstrap their startup. What type of advice would you give that person?
Yeah, if you're an entrepreneur, you have a business, or you're trying to grow a business and you're just starting out, just figure out how to sell your product. Don't worry about anything. Don't worry about the followers. Don't worry about going viral. Just figure out. And I just literally was advising a friend of mine who asked that same question. And she's like, you know what? I'm thinking about doing all these other things to make money so I can get, make enough money so I can pursue my passion of like coaching people in a specific sector. And I was like, why? Just go and talk to somebody and see if you can sell them on what you want to sell them. Even if it's like face to face with one person, and just keep doing that over and over again until you figure out what causes somebody to say, yes, I want to buy that. I want to pay for this. Because if you can't sell one individual, you're not going to be able to sell 1 million individuals. So to me, that's the first place to start, is just go and make one sale. Even if it's a t-shirt, what is it about that? How do you just go and get a friend to say, I want that t-shirt? Yeah. Or to get, to sell one on the street or something like that. Just to see, do you actually have a product that people want? And 2, do you know how to market it, even if it is just one-to-one?
Right.
And then once you figure that, you can build and build and build and build.
Gosh, that makes so much sense. Because again, just from my own challenges in early on in my career, I jumped on the bandwagon of, what type of content can I create to get more followers. And I focused on that more than actually going out getting sales.
Yeah. And it's like, listen, are there stories? And I know because I started in the very earliest stages of influencers, working with influencers all the way back to like 2007, before it wasn't even like a term. And yes, there are people that purely off of content can turn that into a revenue stream and turn that into a business. But that's few and far between. To me, I want to have a sustainable way to achieve my dream. So even if, let's just say you want to be an influencer, you need to find a way to support yourself to make it to that level, because it may take you 6 months, it may take you 5 years. Like I just hired an 18-year-old kid that started making videos when he was 10 years old on YouTube, and he didn't really take off until he was 16 or 17. So it took that long. So that's if you want to be an influencer. But most people from a business perspective, and a lot of people come to me because of the book and say, hey, and I had to rewrite the book 2 or 3 times. And in the latest version, I put this straight up front, is like, if you're trying to build a business, let's build a business. Let's go after sales. Let's go after leads. Let's go after revenue. And then when we have that engine flowing, then yeah, let's reinvest in the brand awareness, the longer play of followers. Because I think people feel that, hey, I'm going to get a bunch of followers and then all of a sudden sell them a bunch of product. You can't, it typically doesn't work that way. I'm not saying that followers can't equate to it, because they definitely can. You can look at the Kylie Jenners of the world or Kim Kardashian also, that turn it into $1 billion empire. But it's not like they just did that overnight. I mean, they grew their brands methodically and put a lot of work and energy and time before they even got to that point where they can say, you should go buy this cosmetic line or this clothing line or things like that. So there's a lot of creator burnout where you get into it and you're creating content, you don't see the revenue coming in or you don't see the success. And then you're like, well, I can't support myself, so I'm going to quit. So I really like to set a solid foundation to make sure that we have the revenue, the sales to support the longer term vision.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So, you've worked with, Taylor Swift, Rhianna, a lot of different big brands. How did you get your start? Just because I'm listening to what you're saying, for the brand new person, need to work on getting some sales, getting some clients. What was your first start? What did that look like?
Yeah. I mean, it's so funny you say that, because we're building an academy right now that's teaching our viral content engineering process, but also how you take that and turn that into your own business using the principles that I've used to grow, my consulting business to millions, but then taking that same process and generating hundreds of millions for other businesses. And, the way I got my start is I wanted to be a film producer. So I started in the film industry, but like everybody else, I had to start at the bottom. I had to make copies, deliveries, and you had to find a way to stand out. You had to find a unique hook point, because it's an ultra competitive industry. There's millions of people that move to LA and Hollywood every year that want to be an actor, a director, a producer, a screenwriter. And I could just see that when people asked me why, in the studio I was working for, well, why did you move to LA? And I said, well, I want to be a film producer. I could just see everybody's eyes glaze over, because I was just one of a million people with that same dream. So I had to take a step back and I had to analyze, well, what makes me unique? How can I provide the most value so that I can stand out at the highest level, grab attention of the studio head, directors and producers. And in college, I created a few internet companies because I really wanted to learn and experiment what it took to grow a business, because in film school, they teach you very little about business. And when I took a step back, I could see that we were spending tens of millions of dollars to produce a single piece of content. And then hundreds of millions of people around the world need to know about this single piece of content in a matter of months to have any chance of breaking even, let alone generating a profit. So I basically just went to the head of the studio. I was like, listen, I had this experience of creating these internet companies in college. And this was like 2005. So it was people were coming around to digital after the dot-com bust at that time. And I said, I have ways and strategies that I could tap into online traffic sources for a fraction of the cost that we're spending on television, print, and in radio, and in some cases for $0. And I said, would that be valuable to them? And they said, absolutely. Like, we want any extra edge in promoting our movie. So that's where I started, going further into the marketing space. And again, it's that principle of taking a step back, analyzing the greatest problem that you can solve, and anchoring your solution, your product, your service, your expertise to that problem. And that's the core principles you mentioned, my new book, Hook Point. That's the core principles of that whole philosophy is how you stand out at the highest levels.
Gotcha. That's powerful. Because most people, first of all, most people are afraid to stand out. They don't want to be different. Most people don't like the attention, which is why, digital and being visible on social media is hard for so many people. What advice do you have for the person who doesn't necessarily want to be the face of the brand?
Yeah, you don't have to be. And it's also, you don't have to be on social media to be successful. Like, there's many other ways that you can be successful. I mean, we built a business that was managing about 100 million a year in paid advertising spend, and we had no online presence. It was all straight B2B sales. But the question, like, naturally, I'm an introvert. It may not come off that way because I've been practicing and been doing this line of work for so long. But in some ways, you have to stand out. And the real question, or there's two real questions. What do you really want to achieve, and how bad do you want it? Because if you really want it bad, you're going to have to find a way to overcome what's holding you back. And there's definitely something that's holding us all back from something. We all experience some type of trauma early on, or something that happens to us that makes us question ourselves or makes us nervous or things like that. But in some level, if you want to achieve a level of success, whether that is working your way up in an organization or creating your own business, you're going to have to get comfortable with standing out. Now, with that said, standing out could be standing out in front of one person. It doesn't have to mean that you have to stand out in front of 1 million people.
Right.
So there's different ways to do that. But I think it's first and foremost, what is it you really want to achieve? How bad do you want it? And what are you willing to take to get there? Now, with that said, there's other avenues that you can take. You can find a co-founder. Like, you look at the best example of this is Steve Wozniak or Wozniak and Steve Jobs, where Steve Jobs was the front person and Wozniak didn't have to really be that front runner. So there are other ways where you can partner with other people to do that. But standing out, especially in today's world, you have to do that to have a chance of success, because there's just so much competition and noise out there.
Totally agree. So you mentioned, you're an introvert, and you're right. I wouldn't have guessed that. I wouldn't have guessed that. Was that one of the challenges you had to overcome, and before you really start seeing success and catching your stride?
I don't think it was. To me, I love to solve problems for people, and I think it's very easy if you go in with the mindset is, I want to understand this person. I'm just gonna, and it could be a group of people. I'm going to ask questions and find out how they perceive the world. What is their greatest challenge and obstacle? And then from there, I will figure out, well, how can I support them in solving that problem? And that takes a lot of pressure off, because you're not leading with trying to sell something, or you're not leading with trying to kind of be something that you're not. You're just going in with, hey, I want to help this person. And this is, I think, also one of the reasons that I've been able to get clients at the highest levels is I don't go in wanting anything from them or expecting anything from them. I want to go in and understand, how can I support them? Whereas they're getting approached hundreds of times a day with people just reaching out, wanting something from them, and they can sense that right away. So I've been going in with that mindset, takes off a tremendous amount of pressure, especially in starting a meeting or starting a conversation. And yeah, I had to get better and practice at it, and, go in front of bigger people, bigger rooms, bigger crowds and things of that nature. But it kind of naturally unfolds for me in that way.
Gotcha. And I think, coming from a direct sales background, a lot of the sales training is, go, 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 push, 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 close the deal, sort of that Gordon Greco, philosophy. And it doesn't feel good. And,
and I want to say that it's not to say that stuff can't work. And I'm not going to sit here and say there's only one way of doing things. It's just the philosophy that I've adopted and it's worked for me. And that's how I've gotten the clients. So I don't want to sit here and say my way is the only way or my way is the best way, because like in direct sales, you probably had success selling stuff using those tactics. But like you said, does it make you feel good? Does it also allow you to excel to the highest levels?
It doesn't. It doesn't. And, that's the industry, the profession is changing. And, a lot of my friends and people, in our network, they come from a sales background, and the ultra confident salesperson, they'll have success just by default because of their personality and their ability to navigate through those tough situations. But the bulk of the profession, most people, they're not like that. And what you just said, I think that's more effective. And I agree with you. There's no right or wrong way. There's more than one way to do it, but I'm pretty sure you've seen in your experience, even people, trying to do business with you. I'm pretty sure you get hit up all the time, people wanting to do partnerships with you. It probably works a lot better when they genuinely want to know how they can support you versus trying to get something from you.
Yeah. And you can read through it all the time. Even the people that try and take that angle of support, you can see the people that genuinely want to help and the people that are pretending to it. Like LinkedIn is like the perfect place to look at that. I mean, the outreach on LinkedIn is the worst of the worst, and you can see it across the board. But yeah, and listen, it's not just like, you can't send a message saying, "Hey, I want to help you. How can I help you?" Because that's like, what? You're putting too much energy on me to like figure out how you can help me when I have no context. So it has to be anchored into something. And one of my advisors, Ernest Lupinacci, he's one of the top branding experts in the world. He's coined this phrase that I use all the time: is it's not easy, but it's simple. It's like, you think about like a marathon, you have to, or an Ironman, you have to swim a number of miles, run a number of miles, and bike a number of miles. It's pretty simple, but is it easy? No. So it's like everything that we talk about is, at its core, is very simple in its philosophy, that you want to go in there and find ways to offer value. But the nuanced detail of how you deliver it, how you read the reaction, and also timing, especially in person, like timing. I got, when I was working in the studio, I would read the body language, the facial tones, the expressions of the head of the studio to know exactly when to approach him and when not to approach him. And then when I did approach him, I could respond and see how he was responding when I would tell him something or ask him something, to see if I was headed in the right direction or not. So there is a lot of nuance in it, but at the core, that's kind of the philosophy that I've adopted, that I think takes that edge off of being uncomfortable in those situations.
could you give us an example of you reaching out, or maybe someone reaching out to you for an opportunity to, form a partnership, whereas the approach was right, the offer was right, or are there some situations that stick out that, maybe the approach, the offer was right, but the approach was off? And
Yeah, I can remember like a big mistake when we were scaling this paid advertising company. We would always go in and start with a pitch deck, and we would just walk them through the pitch deck and then ask, what do you think is, but that causes so many issues because you have no idea what this person values, what their greatest challenges are, what things they've tried in the past that have worked and haven't worked, who are they currently working with already, that you could be done, but they could have tuned out on slide 2, or they could have tuned out on the last slide. They could have loved everything until you said something in the last slide. So we threw out the whole thing, and we would never even use pitch decks. And I never go in and do a demo or anything in any meeting I go to. I just really want to get to the core of who this person is. What do they perceive as valuable? What do they not perceive as valuable? What is the greatest challenge that they're trying to achieve? And then I anchor my story or my product or service to that. Now, I'm not making a stretch. If it's something that our company doesn't do, I'm not going to offer our product as a solution, but I may say, hey, this isn't really the right fit for us, but I've got this great partner that you should really talk to. Because then that can set you up for a longer term relationship. You may not close the deal today, and this has happened many times, but that deal may close 5 years from now, in a different capacity.
Gotcha. That makes sense. That makes so much sense. And it's not as stressful because you're not having to, that's hard work coming in with, you've already made up your mind of what you're going to say, what you're going to pitch them. And then all the way to the end, like you said, you lose them with that last slide and they totally checked out.
Yeah. And people inherently, people like to talk about themselves. They like to talk about their work. And it's also, again, everybody that's listening to this, if I were to say, what is the thing that keeps you up at night? What gives you the most stress or anxiety? And then I came up to you on the street, or anybody said, hey, I really know you're experiencing this problem, and I think I have a solution for you. Would you mind if I could help you solve that problem? Like, how are you going to respond to that? Like, you're going to say, yes, maybe it comes down to the financials and the financials are out of whack or something. But if that comes off genuine and that person feels like you really understand what they're going through, you have such a greater chance of closing that deal. Or maybe it's not closing that deal. Maybe it's getting them to share your content or whatever it may be. A far better chance than just going in there and just doing a sales pitch and stuff. Like, I can't even watch like Shark Tank anymore, because like that isn't even really like, yes, like when you're dealing with investors, you have to pitch them, but I hate the word pitch, because I think, and you see a lot of those people that are just come off really uncomfortable. And obviously they're in front of cameras and stuff, but I've seen it personally in the room. It's just like, that's not who we are as human beings. We're not getting up on stage and performing.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you 1,000%. Well, man, I'll be honest. I know we're running out of time. This has definitely been a pleasure to have you, man. I'm really enjoying this. Is there anything that you would like to leave us with before we end it?
I mean, to me, this is not something that is going to happen overnight. Just keep at it, keep practicing it, keep going after what you really want, because it's interesting. And I think Mark Cuban said this, like, business is the ultimate sport. It's like there's no off season, and it's not like you play for a certain number of years. You're in it for the long haul. So you've got to be constantly practicing and honing your craft to reach the levels that you want.
Absolutely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's see. We'll be including, Brendan's link to where you can go. You can go learn a little bit more about him. You can go support and get a copy of his new book. Brendan, thank you so much. Again, this has definitely been an honor. It's a privilege to have you. I know you're a super busy man, and I just appreciate the value that you just shared with us. And I'm definitely confident that this is going to impact a lot of people.
I appreciate it. It was a pleasure to connect with you and everybody that tuned in.
Thanks.